I'm Val. Are you ready to learn some more about forest ecosystems? In our last video, you learned about the consumers. Do you remember where consumers get their energy from? Consumers get their energy by eating other living organisms. This time, we're going to focus on decomposers. As we talk about them, remember to think about how they might be connected to other living and non-living parts of the ecosystem. What do you think a decomposer might be? Decomposers are organisms that get their energy by breaking down other dead organisms and wastes. There are three main groups of decomposers, and I like to call them the FBI. The F stands for fungi. Can you think of any fungi that you might have seen before? Fungi are things like mushrooms that might grow on rotting logs or rich organic soil. And when we think of fungi, it's usually that mushroom that we think about. But really that mushroom is just a tiny part of the fungus. It's only the fruiting body. Just like an apple, the fruit is only a tiny part of the whole apple tree. Most of a fungus lives underground and is called the mycelium. It's made up of tons and tons and tons of little tiny white hair-like structures, almost like roots, that are called hyphy, that create a big branching network all underneath the soil. If you've ever turned over a rotting log or broken a piece of bark off of a log and saw weird white strands inside, those were hyphy. That was part of a mushroom's mycelium. The hyphae exude chemicals called enzymes into the environment around their bodies, into all the dead stuff that they might be growing through. And that breaks down the dead material so they can absorb it into their cells. It's almost like having a stomach outside their bodies. Our stomachs do the same thing with enzymes to break down our food, just inside of us. The B in FBI stands for bacteria. Bacteria are the invisible decomposers. So tiny that we can't see them at all. They live on and inside dead plants and animals. And just like fungi, they excrete enzymes into the dead stuff around them to break it down. The enzymes break the dead stuff down into small molecules that the bacteria can then absorb into their cells. When you look at a pile of rotting leaves, or maybe into some old compost and it's all slimy and nasty, it's probably because there are bacteria in there, breaking it down. Not all bacteria are decomposers, but many of them are. The I in FBI stands for invertebrates. Invertebrates are animals with no backbones, like insects, worms, or mites. Not all invertebrates are decomposers, but many of them are. These invertebrate decomposers generally break down dead material by eating it and then pooping it out. Things like millipedes, earthworms, and roly-polies are all invertebrate decomposers. Scavengers, like vultures and crows, are often confused for decomposers because they do a fairly similar job. They eat a lot of dead stuff. I think the easiest way to tell scavengers and decomposers apart is that scavengers usually eat things that are only recently dead. The stuff they're eating, you can still tell what it was when it was alive. When a crow is eating roadkill on the side of the road, it's being a scavenger, not a decomposer. Scavengers usually could catch live prey if they wanted to. They just take advantage of things that are already dead. It's kind of the lazy way of being a consumer, right? Why hunt food when you could just wait for it to get killed by something else instead? Along those lines, scavengers usually eat animals. You don't find many scavengers of plants. If something's eating a dead plant, it's probably a decomposer. Decomposers get their energy from both plants and animals. Decomposers break down old rotting fruit, an old animal carcass, or even poop. A mushroom growing on a rotting log is a decomposer. And decomposers can only eat dead stuff. You're not going to see a mushroom or some bacteria getting up to go chase down some prey when there's nothing dead available. They need their food to be dead before they can eat it. Now, you're probably realizing that decomposers tend to be the kinds of organisms that we think of as icky, the kind of stuff that we don't really want to touch or to hold. And that's probably because we usually find them around nasty, rotting, stinky stuff. We don't want to touch that. But decomposers are amazing and super important to the ecosystem. They take all those nutrients that are locked up in the dead stuff and break it down. They release it into the soil so that the next generation of plants and animals can have access to all of those nutrients. So even though they're kind of icky, one of the most important ways we can be stewards of decomposers is by giving them some respect and by encouraging everyone else to do the same. There is something just irresistibly kickable about a mushroom in a field, right? We love to kick them on the ground or break them off of trees. But when we do that, we're taking away their ability to spread and reproduce, their ability to continue doing their jobs, which are so important. When we squish bugs that we might find icky or gross, we're forgetting that they have lives and roles in our ecosystems that are just as important as ours. You can be a decomposer steward by making sure you treat all of these organisms with respect, and by teaching the people that you know to do the same. Take a close look at some of these organisms sometime. They're amazing. Imagine what our world would look like without decomposers. Every leaf that had fallen in the autumn for the last millions and millions of years, every animal that had ever died, every poop that had ever been pooped, would still just be sitting there. It'd be a pretty gross world. And all of that stuff would have its nutrients locked up inside, so no new plants or other organisms could grow. A world without decomposers is a world frozen in time. As plants and animals grew, developed, matured, and died, all of their nutrients would just remain locked up in their bodies, inaccessible to any new generations. Eventually, life would just use up all of the nutrients on the planet, and there couldn't be any new life. Nothing new could grow because all the nutrients on the planet would be locked up in the dead, not decomposing bodies of every organism that had ever lived. Decomposers allow life to continue. They're the great recyclers of the ecosystem, and we're going to take a closer look at them with our activity. For our activity this time, we're going to try to grow some decomposers. For this activity, you'll need 1 big slice of bread, or 2 little slices, and 2 plastic bags. You'll also need a dish, like a bowl or a plate, and a little bit of water. Take your slice of bread and get it a little bit wet by either spraying it with a spray bottle or dipping it quickly in some water. So I'm going to pour some water out on this bowl, or out on this plate, and take my bread and just quickly dip it in there. And that's plenty. It doesn't need to be soaking wet, just have some water. And then, if I have 2 slices of bread, I'm going to put them each in their own plastic bag. And if I have 1, I'll cut it in half, and then put each half in its own plastic bag. Then make sure you seal that bag nice and tight so that the water can't get back out. So now we're going to do an experiment. Put 1 bag somewhere bright and warm, maybe the window where you did your water cycle experiment. And then put the other bag somewhere cool and dark, like the back of a cabinet, but make sure you don't forget about it. Make a hypothesis or an educated guess about what will happen to each piece. Check on your slices of bread every day and see if any decomposers appear. Are the 2 slices of bread different? Do different decomposers grow on the light slice versus the dark slice? Or do they grow at different rates? Send your observations or photos of your decomposer garden to education@mtsgreenway.org, and we might share them on our social media. And when you visit your sit spot, See if you can find any decomposers living in their natural habitats, and draw any ones that you might find. And don't forget to check out our next video to learn some more about what decomposers help create: healthy soil. See you next time!